The courtroom fell silent with the judge's gavel coming down with a sharp crack. The noise was loud, the echo off the chilly wooden walls, resounding in the air like thunder confined in a box. The resultant silence was not normal. It was oppressive. It weighed down on each chest, each breath, choking the room with the pressure of what was to come out. Nobody could breathe. Nobody could move. Even the hum of the overhead lights caught, as if the very building itself was aware that something terrible was about to emerge. And amid the quiet, one truth, one sequestered secret, was on the cusp of destroying everything the Brown family believed they knew about Garrison. The family sat in a line that more resembled a broken strand than a solid front. Kody Brown sat in the middle, his shoulders squared, his chin slightly pointed upwards as though pushing off an unseen blow. His face was hard, impassive, but his hands betrayed him. His fingers drummed against the table, fast, agitated, unable to sit still. His eyes remained locked straight ahead, refusing to look at the people who once called him husband, father, partner. Next to him, Janelle Brown's entire body shook. Her fists were bunched in each other so hard her knuckles were white, like she could actually keep herself from shattering with mere strength. But her lips trembled, her chest heaved in ragged gasps, and her eyes were bloodshot from midnight sobbing. She was smaller than she had ever been. Like loss had sucked the life out of her. Christine sat inches from him, mumbling softly under her breath. Everyone could see the motion of her lips and the tilt of her head, but no one could catch the words. She was praying. Praying for peace, for strength, for a son who would no longer hear. Her body rocked gently, like a mother calming herself when the child is no longer present to be held. On the opposite side, Meri gazed down at her lap. She couldn't manage to raise her head. Even for an instant, her hands wrung the edge of a tissue until it was close to tearing apart. Her face was expressionless, but her silence was louder than any of them yelps. And then Robyn. Her face was already streaked with tears, but more came pouring down, unable to be stopped. She did not even attempt to wipe them away. Her chest rose and fell with silent sobs as she sat rigidly, almost as if she did not know where she fit in this room of sorrow. She was weeping, yes, but her tears were weighed differently. A combination of sadness and guilt that no one could quite define. Behind them the siblings sat in rows. Some squirmed uncomfortably, some clasped each other's hands, but most of them simply stared down at the gleaming floor. Not one of them had the nerve to look up at the judge. Each and every person in that courtroom was well aware of why they had been brought there. Garrison Brown, son, brother, friend, soldier, was no more. His abrupt, senseless death had shaken not only his family, but the world at large. His life had been splashed across news headlines, discussed on social media, analyzed by people who did not know him, but were pained by his passing. But this was not a courtroom about headlines. This was not about the cameras or crowd that had surrounded the Brown family for years. This was about something much heavier, something that had been concealed. Rumors had been made for months about more to Garrison's life than anyone knew. His smile on television, his laugh with his friends, his charm with his relatives, it was all genuine, but it was not the whole picture. Behind closed doors, Garrison had led a life that few knew, and even fewer comprehended. And here in this courtroom, that double life was going to be exposed. The air was heavy with expectation. The cough at the back of the room sounded like a bellow. The rustle of documents on the lawyer's desk sounded like thunder. Even the slight groan of the wooden bench beneath Janelle's seat seemed to reverberate, as if the room itself wished to remind her she still sat there, still among them for this agonizing moment. The prosecutor stood up. He walked with caution, as if with each step there was a weight of the truth that he was holding. In his hand was a folder, bulk, frayed, with papers, journals and letters that no one from the Brown family had ever laid eyes on. Janelle's breath froze in her throat as her gaze landed on it. She had no idea what was within, but something in the core of her being was certain that what was inside those pages would break her to pieces. Christine immediately grasped her hand, the two mothers exchanging silently given strength as only mothers could. Kody, though, did not move. His jaw was set, his eyes narrowed. If he was afraid, he did not show it. If he was guilty, he hid it. His face was the face of a man who would not be broken, even if the truth would cut him apart. But truth does not ask permission. It does not wait for a man to be prepared. It comes. The prosecutor's tone echoed out, strong and unyielding. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today not just due to tragedy, but due to silence. Silence that went on too long. Silence that took the life of a young man. Garrison Brown had two lives. One that the world knew, and one that he kept secret even from the people closest to him. And today, we shall witness both. The words hit like bullets. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Janelle's body shook harder, and Christine's prayers grew louder under her breath. Robyn's tears quickened, and Meri's head sank lower. The siblings exchanged frightened looks, as though pieces of their brother they thought they knew were about to be stripped away forever. Kody didn't blink. Not externally, but his tapping fingers ceased abruptly. His hands stalled, his chest rose higher than ever, his breaths heavier. A fleeting glimpse of fear appeared in his eyes, then vanished. The prosecutor placed the folder on the table, his hand hovering over it like a weapon about to be drawn. Within this file are letters, diaries, and messages penned by Garrison himself. They are a narrative of loneliness, of brokenness, of fragmentation, and of one boy growing into a man who was never really seen. They are not easy to read. They are not easy to listen to. But they are the truth. And this truth is his. The judge's gavel struck lightly, not to quiet the room this time, but near somberly in a chord. The weight of those words lingered in the room like smoke. Heavy, choking, unavoidable. Everyone in that room understood the next few moments would alter everything. The Brown family had come to expect the pain, but what they did not anticipate was having the very fabric of their family ripped apart in the public eye. And as the folder crept open, and the initial words of Garrison's secret life ready to pour out into the air, one thing became evident. This was not merely a courtroom. This was a reckoning. The courtroom was silent, each beat of each person's heart audible to ring out in the quiet. The prosecutor's eyes were on all of them. As he opened the folder, the documents that lay within were delicate but contained the fury of a storm capable of ripping apart each person in that room. He drew out the first page, spreading it flat. His voice was calm, but even he appeared to pause before he began, because he knew, once the words were out of his mouth into the air, there was no going back. This one was penned late at night, mere weeks before Garrison died, the prosecutor murmured. Then he read, "I don't know how much longer I can live like this. Everyone believes I'm okay. They notice me smiling, they hear my laughter, and they think it's real. But deep down, I'm invisible. I'm forgotten, like a ghost that roams through a home that was once my own but is no longer. Dad does not notice me. Perhaps he never has. He's caught up with Robyn and her children. I don't hold them responsible. But where does that leave me? Where does that leave us?" The words fell into the room like broken glass. Every sentence cut more brutally than the last. Janelle gasped, her hand leaping up to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Christine grasped her arm tightly, whispering, "Oh Garrison, oh baby." Robyn just collapsed, shaking as great sobs tore through her chest. And then Kody, his lips were compressed into a thin line. His eyes flicked to the ground, not meeting anyone else's in the room. For the first time, his facade cracked. His jaw shook. The prosecutor set down the page, then picked up another. "This one was written 2 months before," he said. Once more his words contained Garrison's concealed truth. "I attempt to distract myself with work, with friends, with anything to keep the silence away. But when the house is still, the thoughts increase. I hear the arguing within my mind, the family disintegrating. I see Dad leaving Mom, leaving us. I see Christine hurt, Meri alone. I feel it all, but nobody sees me. I wish someone would just glance at me and see. I'm not fine." The sobs in the courtroom grew louder. A sister covered her face with her hands. Meri's lips trembled as tears slipped down her cheeks, though she still refused to lift her head. Kody settled back in his chair, his breathing irregular. His hand quivered against the table, as if he'd like to bang his fist down and shut off the reading. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because this was not other people's accusation. These were his son's own words. The prosecutor stopped, allowing the family a moment to take in the magnitude of what had just been said. His eyes scanned them, not ungentle but resolute, as if he was reminding them that this was not their pain. This was about Garrison's truth. And then he went on. There is more. Letters written to close friends. Confessions he never shared with those sitting here today. They show a young man who loved deeply but who bore secrets no one knew. He reached for another page. Sometimes I feel like a soldier within my own household, fighting battles I cannot possibly win, trying to hold it together for Mom, trying to make Mom and the rest of my siblings laugh. But with Dad, I gave up a long time ago. I stopped waiting for him to care. Maybe that makes me weak. But I am not going to spend another minute waiting for something that is never ever going to happen. Christine cried out, the type of cry that tore from the heart, raw and unadulterated. She hid her face in her hands. Her agony filled the courtroom like a dirge of sorrow. Janelle shook her head, gasping through tears. No. He knew I loved him. He knew. But the shame in her eyes betrayed her. Kody sat back. His white face flushed only around the eyes. For the first time, those eyes sparkled, not with great tears, but with a fierce wetness that he struggled to suppress. His lips parted, as if he wished to protest, to lie, to shout, but the words remained unspoken. The voice of the prosecutor became more weighted. Him and his friends sent us text messages where Garrison wrote about being invisible in his own house. He described how he watched his dad's love go completely to Robyn and her kids, with him and his siblings relegated to being background characters in their own lives. He raised the last page. His voice was husky, close to breaking. All I ever wanted was for us to be a family. Not perfect, not famous, just together. But every day it feels like we are falling further apart. And I wonder if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even notice? The room fell into shambles. Sobs, gasps, whispers, grief spilling in waves from all sides. Janelle held fast to Christine, the two women clinging to one another, as if they could steady themselves in an ocean of despair. Meri crushed the tissue so hard against her face it tore in her fingers. Robyn crumpled forward, shaking violently. And yet Kody remained rigid. But his face was ashen. His eyes were fixed on the table, wide and immobile, as though rewinding the words repeatedly in his mind. The judge eventually brought up his gavel, banging it softly, not with anger but with dismay. It quieted the room sufficiently for the prosecutor to conclude. These are not the accusations. They are not the opinions. They are Garrison's truth. He wore these emotions silently, and it is that silence that withdrew him from us. His secret life was one of scandal. Only not scandal. His secret life was one of suffering. A suffering which was unseen until it was too late. The words hung there heavily in the air, hanging like smoke after the flames. The Browns sat broken, every one of them aware of the agony. Garrison's secret existence was not in shame. It was in silence. A silence they had all contributed to. And now it was too late to respond to questions he had so long posed. Too late to bear with him the love he had so long craved. The silence after the prosecutor's recitation was suffocating. It was the sort of quiet that did not merely beat, it shouted. It flooded the seams of the courtroom, bursting into every nook, every heart, every soul. And then the judge spoke. His voice was deep, somber. This court will now permit family members to testify. The words struck like a bolt of lightning. Heads rose, bodies shifted. Everyone understood what that signaled. The truth no longer remained between the lines of Garrison's diaries. Now it would spill out from the lips of the ones who had shared their lives with him. The ones who had known him as son, brother, family. Janelle's testimony. Janelle stood up slowly, her knees shaking under her. She was fragile, almost too battered to stay on her feet. Her hands trembled as she held onto the podium. But when she began to speak, her voice contained the anguish of a mother. My son. She caught her breath, the words getting stuck in her throat. My gorgeous boy. He bore more hurt than I ever knew. Her voice cracked. Tears clouded her eyes, but she continued. I thought I knew him. I thought I saw him. I tried to give him strength, to give him comfort. But what I didn't see, what I will never forgive myself for not seeing, was how alone he felt. Her body shook, her sobs punctuating every few words. I would have given my life for his if it would have allowed him to find peace. I would have taken his suffering if it would have allowed him to smile again. But I didn't know. I didn't know. The courtroom was silent but for her weeping. Christine reached out instinctively, putting a steadying hand on her arm. Janelle turned her head to Kody, her sadness curling into rage. "And you?" she breathed, shaking her hands in his direction. "You were his dad. You were supposed to protect him. But you weren't there. You picked distance. You picked yourself." And he saw. He saw every moment of it. Kody winced but didn't respond. His lips curled into a thin line. His face white. "I will bear this sorrow always." Janelle went on, weeping uncontrollably. "But I will never let the world forget about my son. Not as a statistic. Not in a headline. But as Garrison. My boy, my light, my heart." Her legs turned out from under her at the end of it, and Christine held her up, embracing her as the room remained in shock. Christine's testimony. Christine stepped up next. She didn't hesitate in her movement. Her sadness was unshakable, but so was her passion. Her fists were white-knuckled, as she clutched the podium, her gaze already fixed on Kody. Garrison was not just a son. He was a warrior. He was a beacon of hope in the worst moments. He was the one who would attempt to make us laugh when our whole world was crumbling apart. And yet, she paused, her rage trembling as she spoke. He was forced to battle his demons by himself. Her voice grew louder, trembling with sheer emotion. "Don't you sit there and act like you had no idea, Kody. He pleaded with you for your love, for your attention, for your approval. And what did you do with him? Silence, distance, excuses." The room agitated with mutters. Christine's words were not only testimony, they were accusation. "You had time for Robyn. You had time for her children. You had time for yourself. But for your own son, you had nothing. Nothing but rejection. And now," her voice broke, her rage curdling into despair. "Now he's gone, and you can't mend it. You can't bring him back." Tears ran down her face as she pounded her fist on the podium. "You lost a son, Kody, but he lost a father before that day. And that is the truth you can't escape." Her chest rose and fell, as she took a step back, her body racked with sobs. She fell into her chair next to Janelle, the two women holding each other, as if the only way to keep living was by holding one another up. Meri's testimony. The judge summoned Meri next. She stood hesitating, stiff body, but slowly she stood up. She moved towards the podium, like a person wearing chains on her shoulders. Her face was pale, eyes puffy from non-stop tears. Her voice was soft, almost brittle when she began to speak. "Garrison was nice to me," she swallowed. "When I was alone, when I was pushed aside, he saw me. He asked if I was all right. He cared in ways no one else did." Her lips quivered as she attempted to go on. "He did not judge me. He did not shun me. He offered me the gift of his sympathy. And now, having realized he bore so much sorrow as he was being kind to me, it shatters me, because I should have returned that kindness to him." Her fists clenched on the podium, her head lowered, and her tears flowed freely. "We let him down, all of us. Not one, not some, all. And I'll never be able to regret that." She shifted, looking at Kody out of watery eyes. "You don't want to hear it, but he needed you the most. And you weren't there." With that, she dropped her head and resumed her seat, her frame folding inward, like a woman broken beneath the burden of her own shame. Robyn's testimony eyes were on Robyn. For an instant, she did not get up. Her sobs had not abated since the start, and her frame quivered with such intensity, as if the anguish had taken over completely. But then, hesitantly, she rose. She moved towards the podium, hesitating, in steps, her arms clasped around herself, as if she required shielding from the burden of giving her own evidence. She spoke only a little above a whisper. "I tried," she cried quietly. "I tried to be there for him. I tried to include him, love him. But he didn't let me in. He kept his distance from me, my kids. And now I see why." Her chest heaved with trembling breaths. "He knew the rift. He knew how fractured we'd become. And perhaps he blamed me for it." Perhaps he believed I was the cause his dad withdrew from everybody else. If he did, I couldn't blame him, because perhaps he was correct. She shook her head, her tears ruining her words. All I know is that I'll be carrying this for the rest of my life. That I wasn't able to close the gap. That I wasn't able to make him feel at home. And I am so sorry. Her knees nearly gave way as she stepped back, falling into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The room fell silent once more, save for the sobs. The testimonies had not merely uncovered sorrow, they had uncovered truth. Truth that was unvarnished, unadulterated, and inescapable. The Brown family was exposed for the first time, not as reality television stars, not as show characters, but as broken people held together by tragedy and remorse. And in the middle of it all sat Kody Brown, silent, white, unflinching. But behind his eyes was a tempest of guilt, of denial, of a father's horrific awakening. The testimonies ceased, but the sorrow lingered. The echo of weeping hung around like a storm that would not move on. The air itself was heavy, too heavy to breathe, too heavy to move. The judge remained silent, his gavel held calmly in front of him. He had heard each word, each cry, each silence that reverberated louder than the voices themselves. His gaze was weighted, not with judgment, but with heartache. He did not notice a courtroom packed with strangers. He noticed a family broken, hemorrhaging, shattered, sitting in front of him. At last, he leaned forward. His voice, when it finally came, was deep but gentle, as if he bore the burden of each heart in the room. Today, the judge started, we have not only lamented the death of a young man, but we have laid bare the quiet life he bore, a life with longing, with sorrow, and with a pleading cry for contact. The words hung over the family like dust. Nobody stirred. Nobody had the courage to breathe too loudly. Not to punish the dead, he went on, his voice stern but gentle. This court is here to uncover truth. And the truth, as we have heard today, is that Garrison Brown lived in shadows even surrounded by family. He was a son, a brother, a friend. He served his country. He laughed, he gave, he loved, but he suffered deeply, quietly, and too often alone. The judge stopped, his gaze sweeping across the Browns' pew. It rested on Janelle's tear-faced countenance, on Christine's shaking form, on Meri's bent head, on Robyn's weeping form, and lastly, on Kody. You, his family members, sit in my presence today, bearing sorrow no parent, no brother, no loved one ever should be forced to bear. And yet you bear something else. Accountability. The room was agitated. Janelle's cries became louder. Christine tightened her grip on her arm, and Robyn's face fell even harder. Kody remained rigid in his seat, his mouth clamped shut. The judge continued, I have heard the words spoken in this room. I have read the words Garrison himself wrote behind. And there is one absolute truth. This young man wanted love. He wanted unity. He wanted a family that did not break apart before his very eyes. And even though he smiled in public, he screamed in secret, and those screams went unheard. The silence was overwhelming. The judge leaned forward, his tone stronger now. You cannot rewrite the past. You cannot erase the words he left behind, but you can choose what to do with them. Will you let his pain consume you more, or will you let his truth shatter the walls that separated you for so long? He stopped, his words slicing through the air like a blade. You sit here today torn apart, wives separated, children broken, loyalties divided, and yet, you do this one terrible thing together. That thing can be the anchor that pulls you further down into hate, or it can be the flame that melts something new. The family did not move, but said nothing, and the words hit with savage impact. The judge's voice softened, almost paternal. I have watched families come into this courtroom shattered beyond fix. I have watched them yell, blame, despise. I have watched families leave with the decision to start over. Not whole, not unscathed, but with the recognition that time is short and life is delicate. Garrison knew that, even in his pain. He wrote of desiring unity. He wrote of envisioning a family that loved one another in spite of everything. That was his dying wish, whether you know it or not. His eyes focused once more on Kody. And you, his father, need to come to terms with that reality most of all. For in those words I did not only hear sorrow, I heard yearning. Yearning for your presence, yearning for your affection, And although the past cannot be altered, the future still holds on to your decision. Kody's expression stayed impassive, but his hands clasped the tabletop so hard the veins in his knuckles stood out. His chest heaved and subsided in quick respirations. For once, he seemed not like a man holding himself together, but a man trapped by reality. The judge pulled up straight, his voice even once more. Let this courtroom be a mirror. Do not avert your eyes. Do not deny what you see. Look into it. See the cracks. See the failures. See the pain that was left unspoken. And then ask yourselves, will you continue this legacy of division? Or will you honor Garrison by becoming the family he always wished for? The question resonated, ricocheting off walls, seeping into every heart. Janelle cried openly, holding Christine's hand. Christine wept silently. Now her prayer a whispered hush, heard only by herself. Meri closed her eyes, her shoulders trembling. Robyn held both hands to her face, her body shaking. And Kody, still silent, still pale, still not allowing the tears to fall. But in his eyes was something unstated, something hard, something shattering. The judge lowered his voice once again, as though this were a last blessing. Garrison Brown's life was too brief, but it was not useless. His words, his suffering, his love, those are all still here. You have heard them now, you cannot deny it. So the decision is yours. Will you continue living as a broken family, every one of you separated in your pain, or will you seize his memory as a summons to coming together, an appeal to finally look at each other, to finally listen, to finally love? He stood there, his gaze scanning the room one last time. The gavel will fall, but this reckoning will not stop here. It will travel with you home, it will reside within your hearts, and it will ask you daily what you will do with the truth you heard today. And with those words, he brought the gavel down high. Wood on wood crackled through the courtroom. A final judgment. A final silence. But the echo did not subside. It remained, hanging in the air, hanging in the family's hearts. For the judge's words were no longer words. They were a reflection, and no one, not even Kody, could avert its gaze anymore. The echo of the gavel still lingered in the air, when the courtroom finally let out its collective breath. It was not a noise anyone would ever forget. It was sudden, conclusive, and yet somehow, inexplicably, it did not sound like an end. It sounded more like the start of something that nobody was ready to encounter. For an instant nobody stirred. The Browns froze in their seats, as if the gavel had hammered them down into place. The judge had exited the room, but his words, those stinging, irrefutable facts, hung on like thunder rumbling through their bones. The silence that spoke volumes. Janelle was the first to act. Deliberately, agonizingly, she reached out and pressed a shaking hand to her breast. Her tears flowed silently, but her lips trembled as if she wished to utter words. She faced her children, her eyes begging for courage. Christine extended and took her hand tightly in hers. Neither woman said a word for an instant, but the bond between them was louder than any words could be. They had fought before. They had been through heartbreak before, but this was different. This was a hurt they shared together, one that had no easy healing. Meri perched at the end of the bench, had her head in her hands. Her fingers writhed together in her lap, twisting into ropes tugged too tight. She did not weep aloud. She did not scream, but the quaking of her shoulders spoke more sorrow than her silence ever would have spoken. She wished to reach out, wished to be, but years of disconnection and anger constructed walls that her shaking arms fought to breach. And Robyn, she cried into her hands, rocking back and forth. Each one of her sobs seemed to ring out in the otherwise silent courtroom, the sobs cutting sharper than knives. She called out Garrison's name in a whisper, a prayer, a plea, a last attempt to bring him back from the silence that had taken him. But Kody sat stock still. His jaw was clenched, his fists clenched against his knees. His face, pale as it was, would not crack. His eyes swept the room, shying away from the gazes of his wives, his children, anyone who could penetrate the armor he grasped. But in him, a tempest raged. Kody's silent war for so long. Kody had lived by control. He had constructed his life upon it. Control of family, control of reputation, control of his story. And yet, sitting in that courtroom, listening to his son's words being read out,
listening to the judge reprove him. He felt it begin to unravel. Garrison's voice, his laughter, his rage, his frantic yearning, cycled endlessly in Kody's head. He recalled the times he fobbed his son off, the fights that ended in an unbreakable silence, the visits that never materialized. He recalled the texts he dismissed, the calls he procrastinated, the distance he put there. And now, that distance was cemented. No apology would repair it. No explanation would wipe it out. Garrison was gone, and the man who had once thought he had all the answers now knew that he didn't have any. But still, he refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not where the world could see him shatter. The children's pain.
In the courtroom, the Brown siblings sat as a group, their red-rimmed eyes, their slumped shoulders a testament to the anguish within. Some were leaning into one another for support, others blank-eyed and lost in a daze. One of Garrison's younger brothers spoke in a whispered, "He just wanted Dad to be there." The words were a soft murmur, and yet they struck hard. Another sibling nodded, biting their lip to keep from sobbing harder. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken memories. The birthdays lost, the family gatherings splintered, the laughter stopped short by fights. They were a family by name, but not necessarily in reality. And now, they were seeing the price of that reality. A shattered father, a shattered family. Finally, the bailiff spoke. "Court is adjourned, you may leave." But none of them moved. The family remained seated, as if getting up would be an acknowledgement of the irrevocability of what had occurred. Christine was the one who finally spoke. Her voice was gentle, nearly a whisper. "We can't let this be the end." Janelle looked at her, her eyes huge and tear-filled. "Then what do we do, Christine? He's dead. Nothing will ever bring him back." Christine shook her head, holding Janelle's hand more firmly. "No, but we can honor him. We can live differently. We can stop pretending that we're strangers. We can be the family that he wanted us to be." Meri's head jerked up at that. For the first time, she actually looked at Christine. Her lips parted, as if she was going to fight. But instead she whispered, "Maybe that's the only way we can make it through this." Robyn sniffled audibly, tears still streaming. "But Kody," she started, her voice breaking. "He won't change." Eyes focused on him. The moment of truth. Kody seethed from the weight of their gazes. He gulped hard, his mouth parched. Every fiber of him cried out to defend himself, to protest, to deflect blame. But today, words refused to come. He gazed down at his hands, then up at the bench where the judge had sat. And at last, his face cracked, his lips quivered, his eyes shone with tears he could no longer hold in. And in this moment, Kody Brown, the man who had spent decades attempting to appear invincible, appeared human, shattered, frail. He whispered, so softly it was barely heard, "I failed him." The words hit hard, startling the room into stillness. Robyn's wails became louder. Janelle covered her mouth with her hand. Christine shut her eyes, mumbling another prayer. Meri cried out in a sob-laugh combination, as if relief and grief had met in her chest. For the first time, Kody acknowledged what everyone else knew, a fragile path forward. The family gradually stood up, every one of them moving as if there were chains wrapped around their ankles. They made their way as a group, not exactly together, not tightly, but together, toward the courtroom doors. Outside, the chill of the air greeted them, biting and invigorating. The world went on around them. Cars drove by, voices spoke, life went on. But time was at a standstill for the Browns. Janelle held one of her daughters in her arms. Christine groped for Meri, and although it was awkward, although it was tentative, Meri did not pull back. Robyn held onto Kody's arm, but this time, rather than standing tall, he put his weight on her. They stood there, a broken family with no simple solutions, no quick fixes, but they stood there together, and in the tenuous closeness, there was a glimmer, just a glimmer of hope. The last echo of Garrison. As they moved away, Christine breathed softly. Her words carried on the wind. "Garrison, we hear you now." They were plain words, but in them was a vow that his voice, though still, would never be lost. A vow that his suffering would not be in vain. An offer that his family, fractured as they were, would work to be better than what they had been. The mind's camera shutters out on them, moving slowly into the light, tied not by perfection, but by sorrow, love, and the hope for change. And the ring of the gavel, keen, absolute, immortal, lingers in the distance. Because even though the trial was over, the accounting of the Brown family was only just beginning.